it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. Welcome to my May reading vlog. I thought I would sit down today and tell you all about the books that I've been starting the month off with. One of them was a recommendation from you, from the Bookish Kingdom. I asked for some recommendations earlier this year, and I wrote each one out on a slip of paper and put it into its own little jar so I can take a jar off of my TBR jar, sort of little display wall whenever I need an idea of what to read. And this one was Unearthing the Secret Garden by Marta McDowell. I didn't realize this, but I've actually read another of her books. She's written these kind of gardening books about many famous authors. She wrote one about Laura Ingalls Wilder. I haven't checked that out yet, but I did read, there's one she wrote about Beatrix Potter that was really fun. So I have really been enjoying it so far. I just picked up the Kindle book version of it. I knew Frances Hodgson Burnett from, of course, A Little Princess and The Secret Garden, so she's really the perfect person to write a gardening book about. But I didn't know a whole lot about her life, and so it's been really interesting just to hear more about her life as an author. I have read The Shuttle, which she wrote for adults. She wrote quite a lot of adult fiction, although now she's most remembered for her children's fiction. And The Shuttle deals with both Americans and British, so I knew there was a little bit of a transatlantic connection, but I had no idea her full history. She was born in Great Britain. Her father died when she was quite young. Her mother really struggled to make ends meet. They lived in Yorkshire, in a manufacturing town. They finally decided to move to America to join an uncle in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee. And unfortunately, as soon as they got to America, there was like an economic crisis in America, and the uncle had a hard time providing for them. So it was really a struggle, it sounds like, for her growing up, but she always had a great attitude, and she loved Tennessee. Like, she loved nature and the outdoors. That's where she first started to write and started to earn a living writing and really became the breadwinner for her family. I love hearing about how she named different houses they had in Tennessee. One was at the top of the Appalachian Mountains, and they called it Mount Ararat, Noah's Ark. And there was another that I think they called Vagabondia, like Vagabondia Hall or something like that. Vagabondia Castle, that was it. And it's kind of funny because in A Little Princess and in The Secret Garden, the characters often have a little bit of a sense of displacement, like, you know, not having roots, and they're putting down roots in those books in such a sweet way. And so I feel like maybe that kind of came from Frances Hodgson Burnett's own childhood and own life growing up. She did eventually marry Burnett, which was what she took as part of her kind of professional name. They were in Washington, D.C., they were in Paris. The success of her books continued to grow. I didn't realize that she was the author of Little Lord Fauntleroy, which I don't think I even completely realized that that's a book. I feel like that's just a sort of, you know, meme, a sort of vision of like a young Victorian boy all dressed up with curls and like a big collar. But she wrote the book. I'm gonna have to go read that book now. And that kind of catapulted her into fame. And it's fun to hear about. She like knew Mark Twain and Louisa May Alcott. And apparently she visited Emily Dickinson's brother in Amherst. She didn't get to meet Emily Dickinson herself, but the poet, Emily, sent a little poem over to Frances Hodgson Burnett. She had a really great work ethic. I liked this quotation. She was, I think, advising one of her sons who was feeling a little lazy at university. I have reasoned it out to myself long ago that by nature I am lazy. I believe if I allowed myself, I should be always dreaming and never doing anything. Best being forced either to work or to own none of the graces and beauties of life. I have willpower enough to compel myself to do things. Human beings can do anything if they set their minds to, if they set them hard enough. See, that kind of goes back to her childhood, really coming from nothing and having to earn everything for herself. She wrote an autobiography. Her son wrote a biography. Of course, we have lots of letters, so it's really neat, all the sources that the author pulls in and quotes from. She eventually bought or rented, I'm not sure which, a beautiful estate in Kent, in England, called Maytham. That's when she really had the space and had her own garden. Apparently one of her favorite writing spots was in her rose garden. She had a little chair and table out there. I liked this quotation. Gardeners are by nature a forward-looking lot. forever seeking the perfection that the next season might bring. It is true, being out in the garden makes you look forward and think about, okay, well, maybe this isn't growing this year, but next year, what's it gonna look like? At Maytham, Frances Hodgson Burnett would host all of her friends and host lots of weekend parties, probably like what Bertie Wooster from P.G. Woodhouse would have gone to. I have artfully arranged things so that instead of seeing my friends in rooms crowded with people, I see them in old gardens crowded with roses or in an old park crowded with trees. There's some sketches of like house guests who like drew who was at Maytham for that weekend. The Maytham maniacs, one of them said. But she never lost her writing discipline. Beautiful people lie on cushions on my lawn in the shade, but I am toiling. So she always kept on writing. Yes, her 3 sort of international gardens, there's a little map at the beginning of the book. Maytham Hall in Kent, Plandom Park in Massachusetts, and also Clifton Heights in Bermuda. I've been hugely enjoying Unearthing the Secret Garden so far, a perfect kind of thing to learn this time of year when I'm out in my garden and things are finally starting to bloom again. My last reading vlog I posted on Easter, so of course now we are in the post-Easter season, and I thought it would be a fun time to start reading Acts of the Apostles, which I kind of meant to start reading it in Lent and just never got around to it. But Acts of the Apostles starts right after the resurrection, so actually after Easter is the perfect time to start reading it. I'm a Roman Catholic, I go to Mass every week, so we hear readings, of course, from the Bible and that, and I also really I have the Magnificat app, so it has readings from Mass, from daily Mass, and also just readings for morning and evening prayers. So you get like little slices of the Gospels, of Acts of the Apostles, of the epistles, but it definitely is a different experience sitting down and just reading it all the way through. I've gotten a lot out of that when I've done that with the Gospels, but I've never done that with Acts of the Apostles. The TV series The Chosen, which is free to watch online, if you haven't watched it, you should go watch it. I've talked about that in the past and just absolutely love it. I feel like I still think of it, and when I go to Mass and hear the names of some of the apostles, now they feel like people I know. Like I can kind of picture them or picture their personalities. So reading Acts of the Apostles after having watched The Chosen is really neat. It's exciting to hear them, gaining confidence and starting their ministry and having the courage to start spreading the word of Christ, which of course came all the way down to me and all the way down to every Christian who is a believer now. It came from these early days of the apostles going out and spreading the word. They're called before the council and before different authorities, and when the council tells them to stop preaching in Jesus' name and stop teaching, they say, Peter and John answer, "Whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. For we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard." I just think that's such a great comeback to the religious authorities. Like, you say you stand for God. God has told us to spread this message. Do you really want us to listen to you instead of God? Speaking of Peter and John, some of the readings at Mass have been from the Gospel of John, at the resurrection and after the resurrection. In those readings in particular, I think the personalities of the apostles come out, because in the Gospel of John, which is reputedly written by John, John is referred to or refers to himself as the one who Jesus loved, rather than his name, which is just fantastic. And of course, when they discover that the tomb is empty on Easter morning, the one who Jesus loved, John, runs and gets there first. I like that that's included in, what is about Jesus' teachings and being good to others and being close to God. But John had to work that in there, that, by the way, I got there first. And later, when they're back in Galilee and they're out fishing and Christ appears to them on the beach, it's the same thing. It's the one who Jesus loved, John, who spots Christ on the beach first and recognizes him first. And then Peter jumps out of the boat and swims to shore. But I love how in the reading, the writer is but we were actually only 20 yards from shore. It wasn't that far away. And then all of the other apostles in the boat had to bring in the fishing catch by themselves because Peter just had to be a drama queen. In one of the homilies, the priest was saying, this is how you know this was real. And it was about real people, because you get these funny little, very human details in the story. I really hope this is not going in and out of focus. It seems like it's in focus, but it's very hard to tell sometimes. And then the other book I have here to tell you about is Heretics of Dune, which I've been making good progress in. I don't know, I think my My Dune sequels are just out of shot, out of frame there. I've been meaning to get to this because I bought all of these. These are the Penguin Random House editions. They have really cool covers, and the sequels of Dune are kind of like a running joke in my house. Some of my brothers really like them. Some of my brothers really don't like them. When my dad saw that I had bought them all, he was like, "You paid money for those?" The original Dune is really good. My family overall quite liked the recent movie adaptation too. I feel like Dune is having a moment because it had that movie adaptation. I did think that movie would be very confusing if you hadn't read the book. If you've read the book, it's like it's a great adaptation. The original Dune by Frank Herbert is really the best. And it certainly is long enough that like it's longer than this. I mean, you can see on my Dune shelf that Dune is the longest. And I think that the recent movie adaptation is only part 1. There's going to be at least a part 2, which is unsurprising. The book is so long. Of course, prescience and future sight, and also sort of looking back into past lives of your ancestors. Those are all elements of the universe and the world of Dune. So in a way, it's neat that there are these sequels that do take you into this future. However, I feel like with every sequel, I become less and less of a fan of the sequels. Like the first 1 or 2, I was like, this is really cool, like a cool continuation. The God Emperor of Dune, that was the one before this one, I was like, I don't know. So, spoiler alert, we're spoiling the sequels here of Dune. You've been given your warning. Paul Atreides is the main character of the original Dune, and then his son Leto ends up becoming a giant sandworm. I know, see, that was the point where they kind of lost me. So Leto, with his incredible powers, and also partly because he's a sandworm, I guess, ends up like living for millennia, very, very long time. So this, the 5th sequel, is the first one where we're kind of without an Atreides. We're without either Paul or Leto, the second. And so we end up getting to know the Bene Gesserit a little more. The Bene Gesserit are, of course, one of the power players, also the Bene Telaxiu. I don't know how you say that. I never have. They're another one of the big power players, and we kind of get to the power players on the periphery. We always got to know them a little bit, but they were always also a little mysterious. And in Heretics of Dune, we are really entering their world more fully. Which at first I was like, oh, this is so cool. I've always thought the Bene Gesserit were awesome. Like, they're so powerful. They have so much knowledge. But it's just kind of funny as we are getting to know the Sisterhood more and like all the different implications of their machinations. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I didn't need to know that much about the Bene Gesserit. Did I just go out of focus again? Gosh darn it. It is impressive that throughout all these sequels, this element of like mystery and wonder and inquiry that I feel like is kind of at the heart of Dune, it does continue through all the sequels. I feel like in terms of the plots and other elements that come into play, I don't follow them quite as well. Really, you only need to read the original Dune. I feel like the original Dune has it all, but I bought them, so I have to read them. And there are interesting things in the original Dune. Before every single chapter, this is in all the novels, there are really interesting little epitaphs. Oh, stop going out of... There are really interesting epitaphs from like fake books, or from the Bene Gesserit archives, or like from the archives of Leto II, analysis of the tyrant, the Terraza file. I feel like those are some of the best parts of the book because they're just very thought-provoking and very metaphysical, philosophical, just makes you think. Here's one from Bene Gesserit teaching. Humans live best when each has his place to stand, when each knows where he belongs in the scheme of things and what he may achieve. Destroy the place and you destroy the person. I did like Teg. He was sort of the Bashar, I think they call him, the military leader for the Bene Gesserit. And of course he has Bene Gesserit training. The Bene Gesserit moral purpose agreed completely with Teg's principles. That those principles were Bene Gesserit conditioned in him did not enter into the question. Rational thought, especially mentat rationality, could make no other judgment. Teg boiled it down to an essence. If only one person followed such guiding principles, this was a better universe. It was never a question of justice. Justice required resort to law, and that could be a fickle mistress, subject always to the whims and prejudices of those who administered the laws. No, it was a question of fairness, a concept that went much deeper. The people upon whom judgment was passed must feel the fairness of it. Being fair required agreement, predictable constancy, and above all else, loyalty, upward and downward in the hierarchy. Leadership guided by such principles required no outside controls. You did your duty because it was right, and you did not obey because that was predictably correct. You did it because the rightness was a thing of this moment. Prediction and prescience had nothing whatsoever to do with it. Anyway, that's the kind of reflections that you get in Dune, and you do still continue to see kind of the original characters and places. Arrakis, the planet of Dune, has become Rakis. At one point, one of the Bene Gesserit on Rakis finds Sich Tabor, which was from the original Dune, where the Fremen who took Paul and his mother in, that was their home, and it became Paul's home, and then later it became Leto II. He had his spice hoard there, and this Bene Gesserit stumbles across kind of the secret entrance, like Leto II has, since he has his prescience stretched millennia. It's like he left a message for the Bene Gesserit who was going to find the spice hoard. So there are cool moments like that, but I'm not sure they're worth the 600 or so pages. Yes, I think that within my family, I'm going to fall into the camp of really we only needed one Dune. Is this idea of connection to your ancestors and to your descendants and connection across time is also in Elizabeth Goudge. I already posted my Desmarais trilogy review. I'll make sure I link it up above if you haven't got it yet. But I do love that element in all three of the Eliot trilogy books. I've just been finishing up The Heart of the Family. But there is this sense that the past is important. The people who lived in a place in the past, their spirits have maybe infused the house with a certain energy and ethos, and that can still be felt in the present. And so that makes what you do in the present more important too, because it can kind of echo down through the centuries. So yes, that is how my May has been shaping up so far. Got to finish these books up, and I'm sure I will be starting on some new things as well. Actually, my copy of Appointment with Death just arrived. This is a new to me Agatha Christie. I haven't read it before, but we're doing an Agatha Christie read-along over in my Discord group. If you'd like to join and haven't yet, you can send me an email, emma@bookishprincess.com. We do kind of read-alongs every now and again and just discuss different authors, but I'm excited to read this and chat about it with everybody. has been a little while since my reading journal was last in my reading vlog. You guys may recall I started this in early 2020, at the beginning of the year actually. This was a May 2020 page for Dorothy Sayers. This is one of my favorites with the lilacs. Anyway, yeah, I did all my Jane Austen character maps in here, and I just, unfortunately, kind of ran out of steam in August of 2021, so last summer, because what happened in September? A kitten arrived in September. So now that Cymbeline has more independence and more freedom, I've been trying to pick back up my reading journal and fill in all of the months that have gone by. I mentioned in my morning routine video that I am working on a book of Cymbeline, which I'm very excited about. I'm hoping to have that finished in September of this year, and I'll be telling you guys more once it's further along. But I'd really love to do some illustrations for it, and I'm trying to decide if I should just use these markers the way I do for my reading journal. So these are the markers that I use for these Tombow markers, because I kind of like the way that little sketch turned out. Or I could try watercolors or something else. I need to decide. Anyway, I think part of the reason it's easy to fall behind on my reading journal is because, like, I want it to be perfect, and, like, I think I need to, you know, make a draft of it before I actually draw it in the book, but it's just for fun, and, like, I have enough other hobbies that already take up enough of my time. So when I was sitting down to get it caught up again, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it and get it done. And if it's not perfect, if it's not like the one quotation summed up the month that was most amazing, like, that's okay. This is the reason I was never able to keep a bullet journal. It was like too much pressure for what was basically a to-do list. Obviously on this September page, I did quotations from the Shakespeare play Cymbeline, because that's what I was reading and what her name was inspired by. And then here's October and November. These actually I thought looked really fun with the trees, the leaves on them and then the leaves off them. And then here's my December page. This is inspired by my bookshelves with some Christmas lights. And then I probably should have done a page with, like, quotations from all three of Dante's Divine Comedy books, because I did read all three of them last year. But I ended up just doing Paradiso. One of the most beautiful images in Paradiso is of a rose. So the kingdom of heaven and all the saints are sort of positioned on a rose. And on each petal, there are different saints from before Christ, from after Christ. And there's a place reserved for every single person, whether they've, you know, lived their earthly life yet or not. So I did a little just sketch of a rose and then filled in some quotations on the petals. I'm not going to read off every quotation, but you can pause the video to read them if you like. And then, see, this didn't come out quite right, the like proportion, but that's okay. It's just for fun. This is from January. We have Cymbeline reaching for a cup of tea. And then February, of course, I had to do a little sort of Feb Regency design with the invitation and the candles. Here is the March page. This is based on my P.G. Wodehouse, Everyman P.G. Wodehouse books, which are so beautiful. I love those spines. They're just so colorful. And then we're on to April. So that's pretty good, considering that I've been many months behind. Now I'm only, you know, April and May. So I thought we would work on those today. Really, I'd like to get some more markers because some of mine have dried out. Let's see what we can do. Well, I have a cup of tea and I'm just ready to sit down and do a Cozy Things chat with the lovely Kate Howe. Cozy Things is like a podcast style show that she does on her channel where she has different people, different booktubers who come on to talk about their favorite cozy things. It's such a fun series. I love Kate's channel so much. I was just watching her April reading wrap up, and like whenever I watch one of her videos, my TBR just grows too much. Like we have such similar reading tastes, and I always hear about interesting things that I've been meaning to try or hadn't heard of before. Like she was talking about the Grantchester mysteries, and I've seen just a couple episodes of like the first season, and I kind of liked it. But I had no idea that it was a book series. It was originally a book. And the way she spoke about it, it just sounded so wonderful. So I think I'm going to have to look that up. Although first, I don't think I have my Agatha Christie right here. First, I have to finish. I'm almost done with Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie, which I'm reading with my Discord group. Kate has a book club that has been reading All Creatures Great and Small. And I wanted to take part in that, but I just never got around to picking up All Creatures Great and Small. That's another one that's been on my list for such a long time. Anyway, it's just about 2 minutes now, so it's almost time to hop on the Zoom call and start our chat. I'm not sure exactly when Kate's gonna upload this, but I'm sure I will let you guys know.
I am really looking forward to hearing the list of cozy things that you have. So would you like to share your first cozy thing?
Definitely. So I was making my list and I decided, well, I'd start with books, for obvious reasons. friends, this is the second time that I'm filming this because the first time the camera kept going in and out of focus, which part of the reason I got this nice new camera a couple months ago was people said the autofocus was amazing. So fingers crossed. I was going through the settings. I think maybe I figured it out. And now, of course, I have a sore throat. So I think I'm going to keep this wrap up a little bit short, and maybe if I have more to say, I will say it on my blog, bookishprincess.substack.com. I usually do a blog post whenever I do a video because it's fun to be able to just chat about things that I forgot to film, forgot to include in the video. So it was a fairly straightforward month. I ended up finishing basically all of the things that I told you guys about at the beginning of the month. I finished the Damaroche trilogy. Always wonderful to spend some time with Elizabeth Goudge. I had mentioned wanting to pick up my volume of Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning because in one of the books, I think it was the middle one, Herb of Grace, she quotes Browning quite a bit, and it was fun to dip into this. I liked that one quotation where he says that in May, you've summer all at once. In a day, he leaps complete with a few strong April suns. I feel like that is how May has felt. At the beginning of the month, like it was still very springtime and like leaves, very hesitant, only a few of them on the trees. And then all of a sudden, it just happened so fast that it seems like full-on summer. I forgot to bring Heretics of Dune out. I did finish Heretics of Dune. I did a lot of skimming at the end, but I got to the end. Yeah, I feel like my opinion hasn't changed much from what I said earlier. It does feel like the plots just go more and more off the wall the deeper into the sequels I get. One real success this month, though, was Unearthing the Secret Garden about Frances Hodgson Burnett. Thank you so much to Teresa, who recommended it. I did not expect to love it this much. I almost wish I'd bought. They only have a hardcover, and it's about $25, and it was only $10 for the Kindle version, but I kind of wish I had it on my shelf. It was so good. I love how Marta McDowell, in like really the last third of the book, she puts writings by Frances Hodgson Burnett about her garden. And some biographers, I feel like, you know, that writing a biography is a little bit of an ego trip for them. Like, they're not really concerned with the person they're writing about. They're more concerned with themselves and their own past and their own story, which is always a pity. But obviously, Marta McDowell did not have that problem because here she steps back and just gives you Frances's, she wrote about the robin in the secret garden. She wrote about a like gardening treatise just about gardening. She wrote about the ha-ha, which I thought was so funny because I never understood what a ha-ha was. Of course, there's one in Mansfield Park. Apparently, it was a feature in British mansion houses that was basically designed so you had like a beautiful continuous view, but you also had a separation so the cows and the sheep couldn't get up into the garden. So basically, the ha-ha was kind of like a ditch. The robin in A Secret Garden really has a personality, and he is based on a real robin that Frances Hodgson Burnett knew very, very well. She met him when he was a tiny, tiny bird, and she wasn't sure what kind of bird he was. I saw upon his breast the first dawning of a flush of color, more tawny than actual red at that stage, but it hinted at revelations. Further subterfuge is useless, I said to him. You are betrayed. You are a robin. And this line, I may have been the first of my species he had seen in this rose garden world of his, and he thought I was only another kind of robin. I was, too, though that was a secret of mine, and nobody but myself knew it. So Frances Hodgson Burnett was just another kind of robin. So yes, highly recommend that. So charming. I did pick up another jar from my shelf, so we have another recommendation we're going to get started on, and it is The Glass Blowers by Daphne du Maurier. So this was from Heather. I am very excited to try this. I have only ever read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I didn't really care for it, so it'll be fun to see, to give her another try. I did finish Acts of the Apostles. I'm really glad that I got through it. Please tell me the focus is okay this time. The camera is just far enough away that I can't quite tell when it's going in and out of focus. But earlier I mentioned that line where Peter is saying to the Jewish leaders, well, if God told me what to do, why would I listen to you? I'm going to listen to him. And later, he had a vision about the Gentiles and how the message of Christ needs to go out to the Gentiles too, which of course the Jews had always kind of kept themselves separate from the Gentiles before that. But Peter sees these Gentiles receive the Holy Spirit If then God gave the same gift to them as he gave to us when we believed in the Lord Jesus Christ, who was I that I could withstand God? I like that. That's a neat kind of corollary to that earlier sentiment where, you know, if other people are telling you what to do and it's different what God tells you to do, you should go with God's direction. But also, if what you want to do or what you thought was right is different from God's direction, you still want to go with God, not with yourself. The second half of Acts of the Apostles is really all about Paul, originally Saul of Tarsus, who has the great conversion on the road to Damascus. We don't really hear much about the other apostles at all. It's really all about his ministry, going around and spreading the word of Christ. And then, of course, the epistles are mostly Paul's letters back to these new communities of Christian believers. Paul must have been a very charismatic guy. I did read a biography of him by N.T. Wright a couple of years ago, and reading Acts of the Apostles was putting me in mind of that biography because it gives great context and really brings Paul to life. I need to get back into Paradise Lost. I got a couple books into this earlier this spring and then just got distracted. So hopefully we'll get through that in June. I'd also love to read some more Shakespeare. Last year I read a Shakespeare play a month, and they were all lesser-known plays that I had never read before, I wasn't very familiar with. So I thought it'd be fun this year to pick up some of the more well-known plays that I have read, but maybe it's been a while. So I am one act into The Tempest, and it has been fun. Opinions in the comments. Is Prospero more to be pitied or censured? It does seem pretty ironic, though, that he's like, my brother stole my kingdom from me, but, you know, this nice guy in my exile, he gave me books that were worth more to me than my kingdoms. Knowing I loved my books, he furnished me from mine own library with volumes that I prize above my dukedom. It's like, okay, if you liked the books better than your dukedom, why are you mad? I love Ariel and how he describes his own tasks and how Prospero describes his tasks. I come to answer thy best pleasure, be it to fly, to swim, to dive into the fire, to ride on the curled clouds, to thy strong bidding task, Ariel in all his quality. Thinkest it much to tread the ooze of the salt deep, to run upon the sharp wind of the north, to do my business in the veins of the earth when it is baked with frost? Anyway, last but not least, I did finish Agatha Christie's Appointment with Death. We're actually going to do a Skype chat about this tomorrow, Saturday, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll post it in Discord. But yeah, it's been really fun to read. I enjoyed it. I always like Poirot. I actually thought there could have been a little bit more Poirot in this one because we don't really get him in on the action until about halfway through. There's a lot of psychology in this one. In Discord, somebody mentioned that they didn't really feel like they connected with any of the characters in this, which I thought was a fair cop, and made me realize I don't think I usually do connect a lot with characters in Agatha Christie. And I feel like it's partly because you need to suspect all of them. They all need to be possible contenders for a murderer up until the very end when, of course, she reveals it. The setting of this is in Jordan. The characters take a trip to Petra, so the ancient cliffs. It's very, very dramatic. So it's always impossible to guess what other people will interpret as a spoiler. I'm going to say that this next portion is going to be semi-spoilery, and then when it's full spoilery, I'll warn you. But if you don't like any spoilers, you should probably just skip ahead. But in this Agatha Christie, we can kind of see who's going to be murdered, but they don't get murdered until about halfway through. So we meet the Boynton family, and the mother is just a psychopath. She's like absolutely evil, has everybody completely under her thumb, and multiple characters are like, you know, life would be so much better for everyone if she was killed. It would be like a public service. Yeah, so you keep waiting and wondering when and how it's exactly going to happen. And you know, part of the reason I liked this probably was because I totally guessed the murderer quite early on. Obviously, Agatha Christie wants to keep you guessing to the end, but like at the same time, she has to plant some hints about who the murderer is going to be. Like it can't be totally out of left field and you totally didn't see it coming. And I feel like I've seen this in the past, but sometimes there's some weird unexplained thing that like really strikes the characters, but it doesn't seem to have anything to do with like the rest of the plot. But like when that happens, that's like the little red flag of like, okay, this is the key that it's all going to turn on. Although, you know what, I guess that's not always a dependable marker because she has so many books and she can employ so many like twists and turns. Like sometimes it turns out to be the murderer you expected, sometimes it totally doesn't. I really did not want it to be the Boynton family, so that kind of created this suspense of like, please don't let it be one of the Boyntons. So we'll go into full spoiler mode, activated. But that moment in this was when one of the characters is confronting Mrs. Boynton, and Mrs. Boynton, like, almost doesn't seem to be looking at her when she replies, and she says, "I never forget a face." And like, it doesn't make any sense. And she's obviously looking at someone behind the girl she's talking to, and we hear that this Lady Westholm was standing right there. And so I was like, it's totally Lady Westholm. And it was kind of funny because I kept thinking like, okay, I don't know how she's gonna do it, but it has to be her, right? It's not the Boynton family, right? And I was justified. It was Lady Westholm. It was not the Boynton family. Poirot, of course, figures it out. Yeah, so Poirot isn't actually at the scene of the crime. He's not at Petra where it all takes place, but he was staying at a hotel. Was it in Jerusalem? Here's how the story opens. You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed? The question floated out into the still night air, seemed to hang there a moment and then drift away down into the darkness towards the Dead Sea. So yes, Poirot is actually there at the beginning, but then we go to Petra and he's not there. And then when they come back to Jerusalem and they're kind of investigating this, was it natural death? Was it a murder? Then of course Poirot's the one who does it. There's always that classic scene at the end where Poirot gathers all the suspects into one room, and he uses psychology himself to like first make one accusation that's like totally out of left field and he knows is completely false, but he does it to like prompt this one person to defend this other person or to like actually tell the truth when they were lying about something. So all the twists and turns of that end scene are always kind of fun, and that's a real staple of Agatha Christie. There were a couple other Agatha Christie works mentioned in this, and I guess they could kind of be construed as spoilers. So I guess if you really wanted to do it right, you should read them in order, which I obviously have not been reading them in order. I feel like you don't necessarily have to read them in order, and they were very slight. The mentions of other cases in here. Do you guys have a favorite Agatha Christie? Definitely let me know down in the comments. Or like, have you read them in order? It's been interesting in Discord to see different people's opinions. Some people are reading them in order, some people are not. Well, that's about it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed. I'll talk to you again soon, and until then, stay bookish. Bye.